All right, hi everyone. So today we are going to start chapter 4, and the first part of this chapter is really just review. A lot of this stuff you kind of already know how to do. There's only a couple topics in here that are going to be brand new, but for the most part, you should know how to do most of this already. So it should be a pretty easy day. And before we get started, just to let you know, I'm going to try my best to make sure I'm going as slow as I can for you guys to keep up with taking notes. I know sometimes it's hard, when I do video lessons for you guys to keep up with notes. So just remember, if you're watching this during class and you're unable to keep up with the notes, I'm also going to be posting this video on Google Classroom. So if you get behind or something and you want to watch it again, it will be on Google Classroom. You can always watch it on your own time where you can pause it and replay it, as many times as you want to. So just keep that in mind. I'll also be posting a filled in copy of these notes on Google Classroom as well. All right, let's get started. So today we're going to be practicing writing linear equations in slope-intercept form, which for the most part is something we already know how to do, right? We already know that slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So let's just review what these pieces are. The m stands for slope, right? And the b is our y-intercept. And this first page here, we've done this already. If you want to write equations and you know what the slope is and the y-intercept is, it's pretty simple. You just have to put those numbers in these places right here. So for example, since this one says the slope is 2, we're going to take the 2 and we're going to put it in for m. And the y-intercept is -1, so we're going to take the -1 and we're going to put it in this spot right here for b. So that first one would just look like y equals 2x minus 1. Notice how I wrote -1 instead of, I'll show you what I see some people do. Some people do this, y equals 2x plus -1, because they're trying to follow this format where it says plus b. I would not do this. I don't recommend that you do this because this just looks really messy. You don't want to have two symbols there. So don't write it like that. If your y-intercept is a negative, just write it like this instead. Just put -1. Okay, that's it. The rest of these are pretty much the same. So let's keep going. This one, again, same thing. Slope is going to be in front of the x. So it's going to be -3/5x. This time our y-intercept is positive. So we're going to put +4. Same thing with the next one here. Y equals -3x. Slope or y-intercept is positive, so we're going to do +2. Now the next one, I'm going to write it like this for now. So we're going to do y equals -1x, because that's our slope, +7. And we've talked about this before, but anytime your slope is 1 or -1, you don't have to write the 1. And honestly, you usually will not see people write it. Like if you're looking in a textbook or something, typically they won't write that 1. They will just write it like this. So it's a good habit to start writing it like this. If your slope is 1 or -1, you don't have to actually put the 1 there. You do need the negative, but you don't have to put that 1 there. Okay, and then the last two here. So this one has something kind of weird going on as well. We're going to start off like this. Y equals 1/4x. And we'll put +0 for right now. We've talked about this before as well. When your y-intercept is 0, you don't need to write it. It's just not necessary. So the best way to write it would be y equals 1/4x, and we're just going to leave it alone. All right, and then the last one's a little tricky. We've got a slope of 0 this time. So if I write it out, it would look like this. Y equals 0x minus 3. And it's kind of like this one here. When you have 0 times x is just 0. Like this is really nothing. So again, just like over here when we didn't need to write it, same thing. If you have a slope of 0, you don't need to write it. We're just going to write this as y equals -3. And this is a special kind of line, right? Slope of 0. Remember what that looks like? When you have a slope of 0, your line's actually going to be horizontal. So, and that makes sense, right? Because this is the equation of a horizontal line, y equals -3. All right, so that is mostly just review. I mean, we've done that before. So I'm going to go ahead and go over to the next page. Make sure you have all this written down. The last page we've done before, right? All right, so sometimes you will have to write equations from graphs, and this is something that we've done before as well. So the first thing you want to do is find the slope, and there's a couple different ways to do that. We'll talk about that in a second. And then you're going to find the y-intercept, and then you're just going to write the equation. So let's practice. All right, let's take a look at this first line here. So we need to find two things. We need to find the slope and the y-intercept. The y-intercept is the easier one to find because you should be able to just look at the line and figure out where that is. This is the y-axis right here. So the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis, which is right here at -3, right? Looks like it's crossing at -3. So I'm going to put -3 for my y-intercept. For slope, there's two different ways to find slope. You can just count the boxes. That's how we were doing it before. So if I use the 2 points that they give us here, let's count the boxes. So it's rise over run, right? That's how you always want to do slope, rise over run. So this is going up, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and over 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you do want to make sure you've got your positive and negative correct. This line is going up. It's going in the up direction, which means it should definitely be positive. So we're going to call the slope positive 6/4. And we can reduce that, right? So let's reduce that. You're trying to find a number that goes into both of these, and that would be 2. These are both divisible by 2. So if you divide them both by 2, 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So our slope is 3/2. And then once you have both of those numbers, you're just going to write out your equation. It's going to look like this, mx plus b, except instead of m, you're going to put your slope, and instead of b, you're going to put your y-intercept. So it would look like y equals 3/2x minus 3. And that one's all set. All right, the next one, I'll leave this one off to the side in case anybody's still writing that one. Same thing, we are going to go ahead and find the y-intercept and the slope. So we need the slope and we need the y-intercept. I like to start with the y-intercept just because it's easy. If you look at the y-axis, it's crossing right there, and that is at +2. All right, now let's find the slope. So you could do the same thing that we want to and find the slope, or I'm going to show you the other way just for people who prefer to do it this way. We have these coordinates here, right? They actually gave us the coordinates, and if you didn't have the coordinates, you could write them out yourself just by looking at the points if you wanted to. You can just use these coordinates. I'm going to write them like right next to each other. And you can use slope formula. Some people prefer to do it this way, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So you could just use slope formula to find your slope if you want to. Let's do it that way. So this would become -1 minus 2. I just did the y value minus the y value, right? Over 4 minus 0. 4 minus 0. And that's going to equal -3 on the top, +4 on the bottom. And that's our slope, -3/4. That's done. If you did slope by counting, you would get the same thing, right? If you do rise over run, that is 3 boxes, that is 4 boxes. And since this line is going down, that means it is definitely negative. So it would still be -3/4 if you did it that way. Okay, that's our slope, -3/4. And then we can just go ahead and write the equation now, where it would be y equals -3/4x plus 2. All right, and then we have one more. So same thing here, let's find the slope and the y-intercept. This time your y-intercept is right in the middle, right? It starts on the origin. So that means our y-intercept is 0, And let's just find slope. I'm going to pick another point. Looks like there's another point right there, right? There's a whole bunch of points we could use. This slope, if you count the boxes, it's just going up 1 over 1, right? Up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. That means our slope is positive 1 because it's just going up 1 over 1. All right, we're done with this one. We can go ahead and write out the equations. So this would be y equals, I'm going to start it like this, 1x plus 0. But remember, we don't need to write the 1 and we don't need to write the 0. So the best way to write this one is actually just y equals x. It's kind of interesting, right? Just y equals x. That would be the best way to write it. All right. I'll leave that there for a minute before I move on, just in case anybody's writing anything, and then we're going to move on to the next section. Okay, so now we're getting into some new stuff. So this topic we have done before, and now we're going to get into some stuff we haven't done before. So now we're going to write equations from 2 points. So we don't have a graph or anything. We're just going to look at these 2 points here. And I'll talk about those steps in just a second, but let's take a look at these 2 points. So remember, if we want to write equations for lines, you have to have 2 things. You always have to have the slope and you have to have the y-intercept. So we're going to find those 2 things, right? Now this time, since we don't have a graph, we are going to use slope formula in order to find slope. So that's our first step. We're going to find slope. And we're going to do that by using y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. If you're really struggling using this formula, what I was doing before, I remember doing this a while ago, I was making these little boxes, right? And then we can just put the numbers in the boxes. So let's go up here and figure out what those numbers should be. Some people like to label these. So we can call this one x1, y1, x2, y2. And then we're just going to literally take all these numbers and put them in the boxes. So it should be, the first box should be y2, which is -1. So that's going to go in this first box here. And then minus y1, which is 5. And then on the bottom, it's x2 minus x1. So that would be 0 minus -3. And then let's just go ahead and simplify this. -1 minus 5, that equals -6. On the bottom, you have 2 negatives here. So remember, this turns into a plus. This is like 0 plus 3, which is +3. And then we can simplify this even more. So -6 over 3, that's the same thing as just -2. That's like saying -6 divided by 3. That's just -2. All right, so we have found the slope. That is the first step. The first step is to find the slope using slope formula. So that's our slope. I'm going to call that m. That's super important. That's our m, right? Now we need a y-intercept. And the way that these points are arranged, it's actually pretty special. So these points are really nice. Remember, when you have a y-intercept, if we were to graph like this one, -3, 5, that would be, I don't know, like over here somewhere, right? That is definitely not a y-intercept because it doesn't cross the y-axis, right? So this one is not a y-intercept. But if you graph that second one, 0, -1, 0, -1, that would be right here. This is the y-intercept because that x value is 0. Anytime your x value is 0, that means it's going to hit the y-axis. So that means our y-intercept is just -1. It's going to be whatever that number is next to the 0. So that means b equals -1. And then we can go ahead and put these 2 things together to make our equation. So we're going to have y equals, the slope is -2, so let's put -2x, and then y-intercept is -1, so -1. So that's how you do that. You just find the slope using your slope formula, and then your y-intercept is going to be the point that has the 0 in that first position. It's got to be in that x position there. It's just going to be whatever number's over here. That's going to be your y-intercept. All right, let's do another example here. This one's pretty interesting. So same thing. We're going to find the slope. We're going to find the y-intercept. The y-intercept, let's just get that out of the way since we know how to easily identify it. So you're looking for the 0 in the x position, which would be this point right here, right? This one has a 0 in the x position. That means our y-intercept is -5. So I'm going to fill that in. That's our y-intercept. All right, now we need to find the slope. So let's go ahead and use slope formula. This is x1, y1, x2, y2. So we're going to do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. All right, that would be -5 minus -5 over 8 minus 0. Uh-oh, this one's weird. So this becomes a plus, right? Which makes this just become 0 because -5 plus 5, well, that's just 0. So we have a 0 on the top, we have an 8 on the bottom, and then remember, when you have a 0 on the top, that means your slope is 0. 0 divided by 8 is 0. So our slope is 0. So let's try to write this as an equation. Y equals, we'll start it off like this, 0x minus 5. And then remember, we really don't need that 0x because it's a 0, so we're just going to say y equals -5. And that one would be all set. All right, and the last thing we're going to talk about is something we haven't seen in a while. It's called function notation. So we did learn about this a while ago. We just haven't looked at it in a long time. So it's not really anything new though. It just looks a little different. So with function notation, I'm going to go through these steps in just a minute. We're not going to really look at those right now. It's kind of the same thing. So remember, I'm going to go off to the side over here. If we have y equals mx plus b, that's the same thing as this notation. F of x equals mx plus b. These two things mean the same exact thing. They just look different. And I know it looks kind of like this one looks kind of weird, right? F of x. That's how you would say that though. You would say f of x. We've learned about that before. And they mean the same thing. They basically just mean outputs, right? Those are your outputs. Your inputs are your x values. So like these are called inputs here. So it's kind of just another way of writing linear equations. Sometimes you're going to see them like this, y equals, and sometimes you're going to see this f of x equals, and it means the same thing. But it looks a little different when you see examples, so we're going to go through a couple of those. So what I would do with this, we're going to write a linear equation, or a linear function, we should say, and they want us to call it f. That just means we're going to be writing it like f of x. And they want it to have these values. Now that looks kind of strange, right? What I would do here is write these as ordered pairs because it makes it a little bit easier to understand. So remember with function notation, whatever is inside here, that's your input, which is really like your x value. And then whatever you get as an answer, that's your output, which is like your y value. So if I wanted to take this weird thing here and turn it into an ordered pair, we would just write that as 0, 10. This would be the ordered pair because 0 is the x value, 10 is the y value. So that's what I would do first. We're going to do the same thing with the other one. Same exact thing. We're just going to turn it into an ordered pair. 6, 34. And now you can kind of just ignore everything that says and just do this the same exact way we were doing the other ones. Just use these two ordered pairs, figure out what the slope should be, and figure out what the y-intercept is. So we already know what the y-intercept is, right? Y-intercept is wherever we see the 0 in the x position. So there's the 0 in the x position. That means the y-intercept is 10. So that's our b. Let's go ahead and find slope. So we're going to do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So that would be 34 minus 10 over 6 minus 0. And that gives us 24 over 6. And we can actually divide that, right? 24 divided by 6 is 4. So that is our slope. Our slope is 4, which means our equation. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. If you do this, y equals 4x plus 10, that's actually not quite right because they wanted it in function notation. So instead of 4x or y equals 4x plus 10, we're going to do it like this. F of x equals 4x plus 10. That's the only difference. The only difference is we're not writing y equals, we're writing f of x equals. And that's really the only thing that's weird about this. You do it the same exact way, you just put your little f of x first instead of y. So let's do another one. All right, so same thing here. We're going to go ahead and turn this into an ordered pair. So 0, comma, -4, and this one as well. 3, comma, 8. Okay, and let's find the slope and the y-intercept. Y-intercept, we can see where it is, right? There's the 0, which means -4 is the y-intercept. And then for slope, let's go ahead and do that. y2 minus y1, that would be 8 minus -4 over 3 minus 0, which is, this is going to turn into plus, right? That's like 8 plus 4. So this would be 12 over 3, and you can divide that out. 12 divided by 3 is 4. So that is our slope. And because they want us to do function notation, we are not going to put y equals, we're going to put f of x equals. And then let's just go ahead and write it out. Our slope is 4, so 4x, and our y-intercept is -4, -4. All right, there we go. So we're all set. If you guys need to get caught up on notes, if I went too fast or anything, you can look on Google Classroom to get what you need, or you can ask the sub to replay parts of the video, whatever it is that you're missing. Go ahead and get your assignments done, and if you guys have any questions, just email me and let me know. See you next time.